Hi, I'm Eben Pagan. Welcome to Internet Marketing 101. In this training course, we're going to learn the basics of marketing and internet marketing so that we can take our products and services and sell them online. In the first sessions of this program, we're going to dig into the psychology and the mindsets of marketing. It's important to study the psychology and the mindsets first and to take some of the wisdom from what's been learned in hundreds of years of marketing offline so that we can take the best of that information and we can transition and transfer that to the online environment. Later, in future sessions, we're going to dig into some of the applications of internet marketing. We're going to learn about some of the different marketing channels like pay-per-click advertising and email marketing. And finally, we're going to wrap up by learning how to build long-term relationships with our customers using the internet. In this session, which is session 1, we're going to be covering marketing psychology. Marketing psychology. And it's important to understand marketing psychology because if you don't understand the psychology of marketing, then it's going to be hard to understand the application of marketing. So why psychology? Psychology is the study of how our mental emotional system works. Psychology is the study of how our mental emotional system works. As human beings, we have a complex system inside of us that is comprised of our mind and our emotions, and this drives us to do things that are very interesting. Many of the things that we do don't make any sense when viewed from the outside, but when you understand psychology, all of a sudden the things that we humans do starts to make a lot more sense. And in addition to making a lot more sense, these things begin to become things that we can take control of, that we can direct. We can direct ourselves and we can direct others. So it's very important to understand how the mental emotional psychology system works if you're ever going to be successful in marketing. Next, if you want to influence people to buy, then you must know how they're wired. And I use the term wired in a very specific way. We get both wiring and programming. Our wiring is in our DNA. It's what we inherit from our parents and our ancestors before us. And that wiring is what you might think of as hard wiring. It's kind of hard-coded, like the hardware inside of your computer. We also get another kind of wiring, which is our programming. And our programming comes from our early influences, our early impressions in life, some of the imprints that we get from our family and our peers when we're younger. And oftentimes we get these impressions and we get these habitual ways of thinking. We don't even realize that they affect us for the rest of our lives. Now, what's interesting about particular impressions and memories and then the thought processes that we then use after we get these is that when you think a thought, it actually creates neurological connections inside of your brain. And the more you think the thought, the more those connections are strengthened. There's a process called myelination that links up these neural connections. And it literally makes a type of wiring. So we not only get the wiring that's our hardware, like the computer hardware, like the chip and the hard drive, but we also get this other wiring, which is programming, that causes our neurons to connect up. And again, most people aren't aware of just how much they're affected by this process and how their thoughts build upon themselves and become more and more easy to think, more and more natural, more and more automatic, habitual, and outside of consciousness. And they have the illusion that they're choosing their thoughts when they're really not. So we get the hardware, and then we get the software on top of it, with the hardware being like our DNA, and the software being our programming. And then finally, I really like to think of marketing as applied psychology, where we take these principles and these theories that we learn in the world of psychology, and we actually apply them in the real world, in the business world, and we do cool things with them. Okay, we get to apply them in the business world and sell stuff and help people to take advantage of our products and services. And it's a very exciting process to learn how to use these tools and these theories and these ideas to make ourselves successful in business and to help other people take advantage of what it is that we're selling. So we're going to dig into psychology here, and we're going to talk about a few psychological principles as they apply to marketing. And what I'd like you to remember is that most of this stuff is what you might think of as hardwired. If you want to influence people to buy, then you must understand how they're wired. And by applying this information and applying this psychology, you can sell a lot more and become a lot more successful. So let's talk about marketing psychology principle number 1. Customers are irrational. Customers are irrational. It took me a lot of years of studying human behavior and testing different types of advertisements and working in the business world to realize that all of the logical arguments, all of the things that made sense to me, all the great ideas that I had, really were essentially insignificant to the average person. And the reason this is because most people do not make decisions based on logic. They make decisions based on a whole bunch of different pictures and thoughts and fantasies and fears and impressions, all kinds of things that are inside their mind that are causing them to move in one direction or move away from another direction. And I think the most important thing to remember when you're studying marketing psychology is that customers are irrational. They don't make decisions for logical reasons. In sales, one of the things that they say is that customers buy on emotion and then they justify with logic. They buy on emotion and they justify with logic. We'll talk about how to use this information a little bit later in the program when we start talking about mindsets and application. But for now, it's important to remember that the average customer that you're talking to is not sitting down with a blank piece of paper and drawing the pros and the cons of your product and making a rational decision based on the best investment for the long term. The average customer is making an irrational decision, and they're not even making the decision logically. They're making it based on all this wiring and all this programming that we've already talked about. Now, one of the things that I do when I'm beginning to understand my customer, let's say I'm creating a new product or I'm launching a new service, one of the things that I do is I ask myself, what is the customer's irrational fears and fantasies? Okay? So one of the things I do when I'm beginning any new product or service is I ask myself, what are the customer's irrational fears and fantasies? And then I just kind of close my eyes and I imagine that I'm a customer. And instead of thinking about the logical reasons why they'd want something that I'm selling, I ask them, what are the irrational reasons? If someone's buying a fancy, bright red new sports car, they're not buying it because they want safe transportation. Now, a lot of times we know that, right? We make fun of people who drive fancy red sports cars because we say, oh, well, they're insecure. But there's a lot more to it. Usually someone that's going to all the trouble to invest extra money in a loud visual automobile like that is at the intersection of several different drives inside of themselves. Maybe they want respect from a particular person in their life. Maybe they're trying to get a date and that's how they communicate it. Maybe they're trying to make themselves feel better because they just had a bad experience in life. There are all of these different things that come into play when you ask yourself the question, what's the irrational reason? And one of the things that I'm always looking for is the hot button inside the prospect, the irrational hot button, which leads me to discuss marketing psychology principle number 2, which is that customers act on emotion and impulse. So principle number 1 is that customers are irrational. Principle number 2 is customers act on emotion and impulse. So they're irrational on the inside, but when they actually take action, they're usually doing it impulsively and based on a squirt of emotion that comes up. If you want to prevent yourself from buying things in the future that you know you don't need, give yourself a 30-day period from when you decide you want it until you actually buy it. You'll probably stop buying 80% of the things that you buy. In fact, if you walk into the average supermarket and you walk through the supermarket and you look at the way it's designed with all of the magazines and the candy bars and the batteries and the razors in the checkout aisle where you're standing in line, you'll realize that they're doing this for a specific reason, because people are standing there waiting to get out, and they, maybe they have a little bit of anxiety, who knows, maybe standing in line is even making them feel some anxiety. And they look up and there's a candy bar, and they think to themselves, candy bar, that looks fantastic. And their little stomach churns a little bit, and they pick it up, and the next thing you know, the candy bar is eaten. So customers act on emotion and impulse. What do we do with this? How do we use this? Well, just like remembering that customers are irrational and not trying to design our marketing to their logical needs, when we ask our customer to take action, when we actually ask them to pull out their wallet and buy something from us, we don't want to appeal to their logical side. We don't want to talk reason to them. What we want to do is allow them to have the positive experience of being able to act and buy on emotion and buy on impulse, because that's what they're doing anyway. And in marketing, in direct marketing, what you'll learn is that most customers are confused, they're ambivalent, they don't know what to do, they're apathetic, okay, they're lazy, and you've got to push them kind of off the fence where they've been sitting, and you've got to help them make a decision that's good for them, make a buying decision that will help them. And you actually have to turn up their emotion. Okay? You actually have to turn up that emotional drive, and there are techniques for doing that. But for now, remember that marketing psychology principle number 2 is that customers act on emotion and impulse. And if you want them to act, if you want them to buy what you're selling, then you need to dial up their emotion and dial up their impulse. Let's talk about marketing psychology principle number 3. Customers hate to be confused. Customers hate to be confused. Now, the paradox here is that most customers are confused. They're very confused. They don't know what to do. There are a lot of books that have been written lately about this idea that there's too much choice in the world. And when we have too much choice, we get confused. And when we get confused, we stop and we don't take action. Think about the last time that you went to buy a consumer electronic device like an MP3 player or a computer or a television. And let's say it was an area where you didn't already know what you wanted. Think about the research that you did and how you chose it. If you go to the store to buy a new television, a flat screen television, there's so many options and they're so close to each other and the prices are so close that you could spend weeks just trying to figure out what the best deal is, or even what you need or what you're going to need in the future. Right? There's just too much choice. Al Ries and Jack Trout, who wrote a book called Positioning, they said that we live in the world's first over-communicated society. And they said that back in about 1980. Okay, so when we get over-communicated, we've got too much information coming in, we get confused, and customers hate to be confused. They hate it so much that if they start feeling confused, they'll just walk away and they won't buy anything from you. So one of the principles that I like to recommend, and again we'll learn more about this later in the program, is you have to dumb down whatever it is that you're marketing and selling. You have to strip it down, simplify it, streamline it, and figure out what that one thing is, that one aspect of what it is that you're selling that pushes your customer's irrational hot button, that really amps up their emotional impulse to buy. If you're talking too much about your product and you're hitting too many different points and you're not just hitting that hot button over and over and over again, if you're not clear about the biggest motivator that your customer has and you're not hitting it over and over and over in a very simple, easy to understand way, then your customer will be confused and they will be much less likely to buy. Whenever I see a website that someone's designed and they haven't tested it yet, and it has all kinds of features all over it, and there are tabs you can click and different places you can go, and you have to hunt through the website to even figure out how to buy what it is they're selling, I always get that bad feeling in my stomach like, this person's going to have a hard time selling this because customers are going to be confused when they get here. So remember marketing psychology principle number 3. Customers hate to be confused. Now let's talk about marketing psychology principle number 4. Customers hate to take risks. Customers hate to take risks. There's a certain amount of risk in life. Okay? Risk is woven into everything that we do. We humans come hardwired with an avoidance of risk. And if you study the modern field of evolutionary psychology and what they've discovered, you begin to understand why. As we were evolving hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years ago, we were in very dangerous environments. We lived in an environment where most of us died before we got past age 15 or 20. We would watch people around us being attacked by saber-toothed tigers and wild dogs and things like this, and it was just a much different time. Those that had the fear mechanisms that activated quickly and pulled them out of danger were the ones that survived. And in modern psychological experiments, they've determined that, according to some research, that a human is about twice as motivated to avoid a risk as they are to go after a pleasure. So in other words, you'll be twice as motivated to avoid losing $100 as you will be to gain $100. And if you look at the way people invest in the stock market, most people lose money there, to the way people play poker, you'll see this taking place. And those that have learned to invest and get big returns long term in the stock market and playing poker and so forth are those that have learned to control their emotion called fear when risk comes up. And we can't go into it too deeply here, but I'll just touch on this for a second. In some ways, we're actually wired backwards to be successful in the modern financial and business environment. We're literally wired backwards. We don't take risks when we should, and we avoid the risks that would make us the most money or create the most success for us. So, we avoid the positive risks when an opportunity comes up where we could gain a tremendous amount, where we could succeed, way beyond what would be rational or reasonable. We avoid it because we're just too afraid. And on the other hand, our fear comes up and it stops us from doing really anything that might be successful. I mean, if you just watch how most people get to age 65 either dead broke or dependent on the government, you'll see that whatever they're doing isn't working. And if you ask them what went wrong, most of them will not say, well, you know what, I went for it too many times in life. Okay, I took too many risks and I just lost it all. What most people will say is, I didn't go for it enough. I played the conservative route. I didn't think big. So how does this apply in marketing? Well, because customers hate to take risks, what we want to do is we want to try to take the risk away from them. Okay, we want to take the risk away from them. And there's a technique that we'll learn about in this program called risk reversal, where we go beyond taking the risk away from them, and we actually turn the risk back on ourselves so that they not only don't have any risk, but we're taking all the risk, so that it opens up a space where the customer can feel more comfortable taking action. If you look around in the business world, you'll see people offering things like 30-day money-back guarantees. Try it for 30 days. If you like it, bring it back, and you don't pay anything. Now, if you go beyond just taking risk out of the situation, you reverse it and you say something like, try it for 30 days. If it doesn't work out for you, bring it back. We'll give you a refund, plus we'll give you $100 for wasting your time. That's when things start getting really powerful, because the customer says, okay, I really don't have anything to lose. Now, what prevents us as business owners from taking the risk away from our customers? What prevents us as business owners from reversing the risk with our customers? Well, I've thought a lot about this, right? It's the same mechanism that makes people not want to take risk in the first place. A customer doesn't want to take the risk of buying what you're selling. Well, you as a business owner, being human, you don't want to take the risk of risking that the customer is going to bring the thing back and ask for a refund, or God forbid, if you're offering a $100 cash money-back guarantee in addition to whatever it is they're offering, $100 over a refund, then you're really putting yourself out there. And I think this is one of the reasons why most businesses don't offer really powerful money-back guarantees. But if you can get yourself past this, if you can look around and say, okay, so most people hate to take risks. They're really risk averse. Customers are scared. They feel like they're going to be ripped off. They don't know who to trust. They don't know what to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to offer great products and services. I'm going to put so much value into them that no one would want to ask for a refund anyway. Although someone will, because people always do ask for refunds, various reasons. Life happens. They lose their job right after they buy something, whatever. So you'll always get a little bit of it. But you just accept that you just accept the idea of, I'm going to create so much value, I'm going to create such a huge pile of benefit for the customer that they're not going to want to ask for a refund. And then I'm going to stand behind that product, and I'm going to promise huge. I'm going to throw the long bomb. I'm going to go ahead and make a guarantee and a promise that's way outside of what most people would do. I'm going to offer a better than money back guarantee. It makes you really step up to the plate. You enter a new psychological space. You go to a place in your mind where you do things that you would never do before. You increase the quality so much more than you ever would. You become more confident about what you're offering. You take the initiative to talk to customers and find out what their irrational fears and fantasies and their emotions and their impulses are. You really go to the next level because you realize, hey, I'm at risk here. I can't just screw this up. And usually what happens when someone takes that quantum leap and they say, I'm going to take all the risk from my customer. I'm going to take the risk off the plate of my customer. In fact, I'm going to turn it around. That's when the real growth happens. That's when businesses really take off. That's when you come up with offers that customers start taking advantage of. And that's when you really connect and begin to create what you might consider to be a total home run. Next marketing psychology principle, principle number 5. Customers need value translated. Now, in traditional marketing, the kind that you learn about in college or that you learn about in reading textbooks about advertising, they talk about creating fancy logos or giving good feelings to people or putting up pictures that people will associate with security and happiness. And it's all this vague stuff. And in a later session here, we're going to talk about transitioning from name recognition and branding-based marketing to direct response marketing. But for now, at a higher level, I want you to understand that most customers, they can't figure out how valuable your product is going to be for them without you explaining it to them. I do a lot of work in the information marketing business. We sell books, audio courses, seminars, etc. And I've worked in other industries, but this happens to be the one that I work in right now. And this provides a great example of where we can translate value very powerfully. If I'm selling you a book on how to get out of debt, you might think of that as, well, it's a book, so it's worth 20 bucks. Now, if I'm an expert at translating value, on the other hand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say, all right, in chapter 1, I'm going to teach you a technique for paying off your mortgage in 15 years instead of 30 by making a couple of extra payments a year and going on a bi-weekly schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And you're not even going to feel it in your pocketbook, but on a $250,000 house, I'm going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest, and you're going to have it paid off 15 years earlier. What's that worth? Well, if I just saved you a couple of $100,000 with this technique, I'm going to tell you about it. In fact, I'm really going to talk it up. I'm going to say in the marketing, in chapter 1, you're going to learn a technique that will save you at least $100,000 in cold, hard cash on your home mortgage. And I'm going to say it straight up, just like that. If in chapter 2, I show you a technique for calling up your credit card debtors, the companies you have your credit cards with, and lowering your credit card interest rate and cutting it in half from an average of, let's say that, the average is 20%, I'm going to cut it in half to 10%, and I'm going to save you with the average debt being, let's say it's $25,000 over 5 years, I'm going to save you $10,000. I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to say, in chapter 2, I'm going to teach you a simple method, a step-by-step script to call up your credit card companies and in less than 15 minutes reduce your interest rate. This one technique alone will save the average credit card holder $10,000 in cash in 5 years. Okay? Now, those numbers, I'd have to play with them and figure out what they are, but I'm going to talk about it in my marketing. I'm going to translate the value into terms that my prospect can understand. Now, this was a simple example because real estate and credit cards, these are things that everybody can relate to, and it's money, so it can be translated directly to money. But let's take a little bit more subtle topic. Let's take a topic like weight loss. How do you translate the value of weight loss? What's the value of losing 30 pounds in the course of 3 or 6 months or something like this? Well, it could be a financial value. I mean, it might be that someone's trying to lose weight because they're trying to get a better job and they think that looking better would help them get the job. But it's probably a stretch. The reason why they're trying to lose weight is probably something that's more primal. They're either trying to become more attractive, they're trying to make themselves healthier. They may have just gone to the doctor and the doctor told them, if you don't lose weight, you're going to die, or who knows what. There's something that's more primal, that's deeper inside their psyches. And what I want to do is I want to figure out what is the way that they're thinking about the value of losing 30 pounds. And how can I talk to that way that they're thinking about the value? So let's say after surveying my customers and talking to several of them, that I figure out that most of my customers are women who are in their 30s and 40s, and they want to lose weight because they want to become more attractive to their husbands. Now we're getting somewhere, right? And they don't just want to become attractive to their husbands because they want to be more attractive to their husbands. There's something underneath it, right? They might be insecure that he's going to leave or he might cheat on them. And, at first you might say, well, wow, this is kind of serious. I mean, how do we get from weight loss to the husband cheating on the wife? But this is reality, okay? We talked about the idea that customers are irrational, that they act on emotion and impulse, and that they hate risk, they don't like fear. If this is really what's going on, then I think we need to be honest and straight up about it. And I don't think that there's any ethical problem with being straight, honest, direct, as long as you're coming from the right place, as long as you're selling a high-quality, high-value product. I got off on a tangent a little bit there. If I'm talking to that prospect, that woman who I know is in her 30s or her 40s, and I'm giving her my marketing message, I've got a video online, I've got an email newsletter, I've got a blog where I've written a post, I'm not just going to say, if you lose the 30 pounds, you're going to feel great. I'm going to say, are you afraid that your husband might leave you if you keep all your extra weight on? I can understand where you're coming from. I felt that way once, or I've talked to many women who have felt that way. And then I'll talk about how I'm going to help her lose that 30 pounds. And then I'm going to say, what is it worth to you to lose those 30 pounds? Because you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to change your diet. You're going to have to change your exercise. I'm going to do my best to make that as pain-free as possible. I'm even going to make it fun to eat differently and do your exercise. But really, I have to ask you, be honest with me. What's it worth to you? What if it increases the chances that you're going to keep your husband by only 20% or 10%? Is that worth it? What does it feel like feeling desperate and scared that your husband is going to leave you because you weigh too much? Okay? Now what I'm doing is I'm translating the value into specific emotional but concrete terms that woman can understand. And I'm doing it in a way that there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion at all. And in fact, what I'm doing, you heard me mention the idea of customers hating to take risks. What I'm doing is I'm subtly turning the risk around, where the risk of staying the same way that she was becomes greater than the risk of making a stupid decision and buying a weight loss course that doesn't work out, etc. So customers need value translated. I cannot emphasize this enough. If there's one thing that you get from this first session, if there's just one thing, it's that you need to put the value of what you are selling into terms that your customer can understand. And when you wrap around that customers are irrational and that they act on emotion and impulse, that they hate to be confused, so you need to simplify, and that they hate to take risks, so you need to frame not making the decision as potentially being much more risky than making the decision, then I think it can put your mind on the right track. And instead of just trying to talk yourself up or brag about what you do or talk all about yourself and not about your customers' needs, that you go through it with a fine-tooth comb and you find all of the high points, you find all of the benefits that your product delivers, and then you connect them up with those irrational fears and fantasies that your prospect has, and you really translate, you put the result that you're going to deliver into terms that are emotionally meaningful to your customer. That's when the sales line starts to go up. That's when you start doing better in business. Okay, so what we're going to do now is an exercise. Okay, we're going to do exercise number 1 in the Internet Marketing 101 training. What we're going to do is we're going to make 2 lists. Okay, we're going to make a list of all the rational reasons why someone would buy your product. And then next, we're going to list all the irrational reasons why someone would buy your product, just so that we can get a distinction. Okay, so first we're going to start with what are all the logical reasons. Let's say that you're doing this course on how to get out of debt. The rational reasons why someone would buy your product is because your method is a step-by-step system that's logical. Okay, that's a rational reason. It's logical. One step builds on another. Okay? An irrational reason is that your customer is afraid that they won't be able to put their kids through college. Now, there's some logic to that, of course. If they don't have the money, they can't put the kids through college. But when you bring up, you're not going to be able to put the kids through college, it pushes an irrational fear, an irrational fantasy. Because, I mean, who cares if you put your kids through college? They're probably going to be okay. They're going to live. But most parents have a deep, unexplainable drive to help their children have every advantage. And when you talk about it in those terms, they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's what I want. Okay? So we're going to start out by listing all the rational reasons why someone would buy your product. And then next, we're going to list all the irrational reasons why someone would buy our product. Try to get 10 in each list. Now, this isn't an essay contest. We're not trying to write 10 paragraphs on each of them. 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 words maximum will do, because you'll know when you go back and read them what they stood for. We're just trying to get your mind working. Okay, so first make a list of 10 rational reasons why someone would buy your product, then make a list of 10 irrational reasons based on irrational emotions and fears and fantasies. And then what you're going to do after you make these lists is you're going to focus your marketing on the irrational reasons. Okay, if you do that, you're going to sell a lot more. So after you make these 2 lists, what I'd like you to do is look at the irrational reasons and try to figure out how you can take those irrational reasons that they have, and then how you can translate the value of what you're selling into those terms, how you can match up the value with those irrational reasons. Now we're working on our thinking here. We're working on approaching things from a different paradigm. We're literally looking at them from a different direction. We're looking at them from a completely different vantage point. And if you're going to make successful marketing, if you're going to make your marketing work, if you're going to create marketing that sells, then you have to make these shifts. You have to switch from rational thinking to irrational thinking. And you have to focus and you have to translate value into terms that your prospect can understand. So do that, and we'll pick up this conversation in the next session.